Romeo and Juliet takes place in Verona, Italy. Two of the most important families there, the Montagues and the Capulets, have a long-standing feud with each other. At the beginning of the play, Montague and Capulet servants get into a fight with each other. Benvolio, a Montague family member, tries to break up the fight, but one of the Capulets, Tybalt, starts fighting with Benvolio. Finally, the prince comes and breaks up the fight. He tells each head of each family that they'll be put to death if this happens again.
After, Lady Montague and Montague asks Benvolio where their son Romeo was during the fight. Benvolio says that Romeo has been moping around by himself, but he'll find out why. Romeo tells Benvolio that he's lovesick. He's in love with Rosaline, but she doesn't love him back. Benvolio promises to help Romeo forget about her. Count Paris wants to marry Capulet's only daughter, Juliet. Capulet wants Paris to wait a few years because Juliet's only 13, but says Paris can see if she's interested. He invites Paris to a feast that night. A Capulet servant walks around town trying to find a list of people to the feast. The trouble is, the servant can't read. He sees Romeo and Benvolio and asks them for help. Romeo sees Rosaline's name on the list, and then Benvolio says they should crash the party so Romeo can compare Rosaline to other girls and forget about her. Romeo agrees to go, but just so he can see Rosaline.
Lady Capulet, Juliet, and Juliet's nurse discuss the fact that Paris wants to marry Juliet. Lady Capulet and the nurse sing their praises. Juliet agrees to meet him. Romeo, Benvolio, and Mercutio crash the feast wearing masks. At the party, Romeo sees Juliet and forgets all about Rosaline. He is in love. Capulet's nephew, Tybalt, recognizes Romeo's voice and is furious that Romeo snuck in. Capulet orders Tybalt to let it go because he doesn't want fighting at his feast. Romeo finds Juliet, holds her hand, and gets her to let him kiss her, all of this while the two of them talk to each other in poetry. After this encounter, each one tries to find out who the other is. They are upset to find out they are from rival families, but the two of them decide they are too much in love to go back.
After the party, Romeo ditches his friends and climbs over an orchard wall to see Juliet. He sees her on her balcony, talking to herself. Before she realizes Romeo is listening, Juliet says she's in love with him. Romeo steps out of hiding and says he loves her too. Romeo asks his priest, Friar Lawrence, if he'll conduct a marriage ceremony. Friar Lawrence is concerned about how quick Romeo switched from Rosaline to Juliet, but agrees to do it because he thinks it will bring peace to the feuding families. Mercutio and Benvolio tell Romeo that Tybalt wants to challenge him to a duel. Juliet's nurse comes along, wanting to talk to Romeo in private. Romeo tells her to have Juliet come to Friar Lawrence that afternoon so they can get married. Juliet meets Romeo and the friar marries them.
Later, Tybalt finds Romeo and wants to start a fight. Romeo refuses to fight Tybalt because he's Juliet's cousin. Mercutio steps in to fight Tybalt instead. Romeo tries to break the map, but Tybalt shoves his sword under Romeo's arm and stabs Mercutio, and then runs off. Mercutio dies cursing both families. Romeo is enraged, and when Tybalt returns, Romeo kills him, and then he flees. The prince arrives, and then Benvolio tells him what happened. The prince declares that Romeo is banished from Verona. Juliet is impatiently waiting for her wedding day with Romeo when the nurse comes in and says that Romeo killed Tybalt and has been banished. Juliet is first mad at him, but then she decides she's on Romeo's side.
Juliet sends the nurse to tell Romeo to spend the night with her. Friar Lawrence breaks the news to Romeo that he's been banished and Romeo wants to kill himself. The nurse arrives and tells Romeo to go to Juliet that night. The friar tells him to go to Mantua the next morning and wait for the friar to send word. Capulet decides he's going to make Juliet marry Paris just in 3 days. After spending the night together, Romeo and Juliet playfully argue about whether it's done until they can deny it, and Romeo leaves. Lady Capulet tells Juliet she has to marry Paris. Juliet refuses, but Capulet himself comes in and tells her he'll disown her if she doesn't do it.
Juliet goes to see Friar Lawrence and tells him that she will kill herself if he can show her a way out of her predicament. He gives her a vial with the drug in it and tells her to agree to the marriage. Then, take the drugs the night before the wedding. For 42 hours he'll seem like she's dead, and the family will lay her in her family tomb. Friar Lawrence will write to Romeo to tell him what's happening, and the two will be waiting when she wakes up and can take off to Mantua. Juliet agrees. Juliet goes to her father and tells him that Friar Lawrence has taught her to be obedient. Her father feels so happy with the change of heart that he moves the wedding to the very next day.
That night, Juliet debates with herself about taking the drug, thinking about how scary it would be to wake up in a tomb, but she decides to take it anyway. The next day, Capulet finds Juliet in bed, dead. Paris and Friar Lawrence arrive to the wedding. Capulet, Lady Capulet, the nurse, and Paris all lament that death has robbed them. But Friar Lawrence tells them that Juliet is in a better place. They prepare to take Juliet to her tomb. Meanwhile, Romeo wakes up expecting good news, but his servant Balthasar arrives and tells him Juliet is dead. Romeo decides to kill himself and lay next to Juliet. He goes to an apothecary, a guy who makes and sells medications, who's really poor and bribes the man to sell him poison, which is a capital crime.
A priest named Friar John tells Friar Lawrence that he couldn't deliver the news about Juliet's fake death to Romeo. Friar John says he couldn't because the authorities thought he was exposed to the plague. Friar Lawrence is worried. Juliet would wake up in 3 hours and be angry with him for not telling Romeo. Paris comes to the tomb with his page and tells the page to go and lie down under some trees and whistle if anyone approaches. He brings flowers to Juliet's grave. The page whistles because Romeo is coming soon, so Paris hides. Romeo comes and tells Balthasar to go, but Balthasar sticks around anyway. Romeo opens the tomb. Paris tries to arrest Romeo. Romeo tells him he is there to kill himself, but Paris insists on arresting him, so they fight. The page runs off to get the watch. Romeo kills Paris. Paris asks to be laid by Juliet, and Romeo agrees and drags his body into the tomb.
Romeo kisses Juliet, takes his poison, kisses her again, and dies lying across Juliet's chest. Friar Lawrence arrives in the churchyard, finds out from Balthasar that Romeo's there, and goes into the tomb to find Juliet awake. He explains that the plan didn't work. Some higher power reported it and that she needs to leave, and he'll find a place for her as a nun. He runs away because he thinks the watch is coming. Juliet refuses to leave. She sees that Romeo has poisoned himself and kisses him, hoping to get some of the poison. Then she hears people coming, takes Romeo's dagger and stabs herself with it.
The chief watchman arrives, finds the bodies, sends watchmen to round up anyone looking in the vicinity and to take the prince and the Capulets and Montagues. The watchmen round up Balthasar and Friar Lawrence. The last explains everything that has happened. The prince says Capulet and Montague have been punished for their feud, and the prince has been punished for tolerating their feud because he's lost two relatives, Mercutio and Paris. Montague promises to make a golden statue of Juliet, and Capulet promises to make one of Romeo.